soon as they left the synagogue, they entered the house of Simon and Andrew, with James and John. Now Simon's mother-in-law was in bed with a fever, and they told him about her at once. He came and took her by the hand and lifted her up. Then the fever left her, and she began to serve them. That evening at sunset they brought to him all who were sick or possessed with demons, and the whole city was gathered around the door. And he cured many who were sick with various diseases, and cast out many demons. And he would not permit the demons to speak, because they knew him. In the morning, while it was still very dark, he got up and went out to a deserted place. And there he prayed. And Simon and his companions hunted for him. When they found him, they said to him, "Everyone is searching for you." He answered, "Let us go to the neighboring towns, so that I may proclaim the message there also. For that is what I came out to do." And he went throughout Galilee, proclaiming the message in their synagogues and casting out demons. Good morning, and welcome back to our journey through the wilderness, looking at the blessings that God offers us during this Lenten season. Today we're going to be looking at the blessing of rest. Now, often we don't think of the wilderness as a place of rest. We think of it as a place of temptation and struggle and learning to be dependent on God, and all of the things that we've been talking about, perseverance and other blessings that we have looked at along the way. But the wilderness can also indeed be a place of rest. That's part of God's blessing for us, part of God's desire for us. And I know that's a tricky thing to talk about in our culture, where everything is dependent on productivity. Everything is dependent on what we do, what we accomplish, and staying busy is considered a good thing. It is considered a virtue. That when somebody asks, how's it been going, or what's been happening, and the response is, "Oh, I'm keeping busy," as if somehow that is supposed to mean that we're living a good, fulfilled, abundant kind of life. But busyness is not what life is about. And our acceptance from God and our acceptance from others should not be dependent on what we do or what we accomplish or what we produce. Even our acceptance of ourselves should not be tied to our productivity and our staying busy. There is a place for rest and a place to be still in God's presence. It's interesting because a sermon I once preached on Sabbath was one of the most challenged sermons I've ever preached, because the people got angry that I was, as if I was talking about laziness. They talked about all the things that they had to do, particularly those who worked on farms, and they would say things like, the cows don't take a Sabbath. You still got to be out there at 5 a.m. to feed them and milk them and all these kinds of things, and as if somehow the idea of Sabbath went against the grain of our work ethic and our responsibility. And yet Jesus commands us to take Sabbath rest. God commands us in the 10 Commandments, the ones that we want to post everywhere, has right there in the midst, to keep the Sabbath day holy, to keep this rhythm and this cycle of rest. It was built into the culture and built into who we are. Now, what that looks like may be different for everybody, but the reality is that rest is an important part of our spiritual lives and our lives as a whole. And in case you still think that I'm just talking out of a spirit of laziness or whatever others may want to say, let's look at the life of Jesus himself. Because, see, he had a bad habit of getting out away from the crowds to rest. Here he is in Mark's Gospel in this story early on in his ministry. He's at Peter's house. He has been healing people. He has healed Peter's mother-in-law, and he has been healing and casting out demons and doing all sorts of miracles late into the night. And finally, he just has to get a break. He slips away. He slips off into the wilderness, as he does many times throughout the gospel. We often don't notice those verses because they always come in between the stories. We go from one story to the next, from one miracle to the next, from one teaching session to the next. But in between, there's often these little moments where it just says, "And Jesus went off by himself to pray." Jesus went off by himself into the wilderness. And what's really interesting about this particular passage in Mark is the next morning, the disciples come looking for him. They're out in the wilderness wondering, Jesus, where are you? Like a big game of hide and seek. Where are you, Jesus? They finally find him and they say, hey, Jesus, everybody is looking for you. What you did last night was amazing. What you did to heal all those people and cast out those demons, and people have brought more sick and more people who need you. And come on back. We got more to do. There's so much more work to do. You're at the height of your ministry right now. Everything's just getting started. Now is not the time to take a break. Now is not the time to slow down. Now's the time to kick it into high gear. We need to promote this thing. That's how we think as leaders, as entrepreneurs, even as church leaders. That we need to just keep pushing, that we need to kick it into high gear, especially when things are going well. That's not the time to slow down. And yet Jesus took that time out. Jesus wasn't concerned about people not being able to find him. Jesus wasn't concerned about the fact that he had who knows how many voicemails or emails or text messages that had gone unanswered during those several hours in the early morning. And then on top of that, he doesn't even go back to those crowds that were looking for him. He says, let's go on to the next town. We have more to do there, and there's a journey along the way. And even the journey in and of itself is a respite from the crowds and from the expectations and from the demands that everyone was putting on him. A respite and a time to walk and journey with the disciples. And I always wonder about what they learned along all these walks, long walks, days on end from town to town. How much they learned that was never even recorded in those moments, those in-between moments. And so the wilderness invites us and calls us to those in-between moments. It calls us to those places where we can truly rest, where we can be still, alone in prayer with God, to rejuvenate and to know that our identity and our worth and our value doesn't come from meeting the expectations of the crowds. It doesn't come from what we accomplish or what we produce. It comes simply from who we are. And we're never going to realize that. We're never going to come to know how truly loved we are by God until we sit still in his presence. Until everything else fades away. And all that's left is the core of our souls, our true selves, the image of God and who we were created. Who loves us just by virtue of us being his creation. And so let go this week. Take time to rest. Take time to get away. Take time to, dare I say, disconnect from your email, from your phone. And I imagine, even if you take a few hours, even if you take half a day, even if you take a whole day of retreat just to get away, when you get back, you'll probably be surprised to find that the world did okay without you. Most likely nothing fell apart. Because you know what? God's still in control. We don't always have to be. Rest reminds us that we don't have to be in control. It reminds us that we're not in control. It reminds us truly that God has been working all along, even when we can't work anymore. And so rest as you move towards the end of this Lenten season. Be still and know that God is God. Know that we wake up each morning to a world that God has been handling just fine without us all night long. And go forth renewed by that rest, so that when we work, everything we do flows out of the strength of God. Flows out of our identity as children of God, and not out of our strivings to be in control and to accomplish something on our own. Blessings in this next week of your wilderness journey through Lent. Join us next week as we spend some time in Gethsemane and prepare for Holy Week together.